right, it is 8:30 and I am Gary Clark, President and CEO of Economic Alliance, Snohomish County, and I am here to welcome you all to another coffee chat. So we have been shifting gears here by making sure if we happen to have coffee that we hold those cups up. So if you have coffee, please hold it up, wave your coffee in the air and wave it like you just don't care. And if you're ready for some STEM conversation, somebody say, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. So without further ado, I'd like to make sure that we check our chat opportunities and mute ourselves during this call and chat and make sure that you're engaged, and we'll try to make sure that the panelists get to all of your questions and comments. So these are our basic housekeeping pieces here. Make sure you stay engaged, keep your sound low if you're not engaged as one of the panelists, and be sure to list your organization so we know where you're coming from and who you are on the chat. Okay, folks, now I get the distinct pleasure to welcome a very awesome leader in the Snohomish area in Bothell. And this is Dr. Leslie Kornick, who has been the Dean of the STEM at UW Bothell since July 2020. Prior to coming to Bothell, she was the Associate Dean of STEM at Eastern Washington University. She's a physiology ecologist who studies the impacts of human activity in marine studies. All right, so without further ado, we'd like to welcome Dr. Leslie Kornick to take the lead here. But before Dr. Leslie joins, I'd like to give a special thank you to the Snohomish STEM Network. Angie and Alyssa have done an amazing job, and we just want to thank them for all the work they do to bring industry and workforce to our community. So, Dr. Leslie, please take it away.
Thanks, Gary. Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here this morning to talk with this great panel and think about the future of the STEM workforce in our region. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit, you know, just a year ago, we were estimating that by 2030, over 80% of the jobs in Washington state would be science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM related. And graduates with STEM degrees are highly sought after across multiple sectors, not just within the STEM disciplines, because they bring an ability to think critically and analytically, their systems thinking ability and problem solving skills, and their ability to work in diverse teams. So really STEM graduates are a highly valuable workforce pipeline of talent, no matter what your industry is. We've also seen an exploding demand for things that are computer and technology related, like IoT, Internet of Things, software development, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and especially with computer applications underpinning technology advances across all sectors, and how we've been so heavily relying on technology during the pandemic. Cybersecurity has become the #1 sought after IT field. It's really been an extraordinary year with adverse impacts to multiple sectors of our economy, including the critically important aerospace industry. But we've also seen resilience in some divisions in space and defense, diversification in advanced manufacturing. And as the American Rescue Plan is implemented and vaccination rates increase, many of these industries will see a resurgence. Just in the last few days, we've seen a number of our airline partners, and so happy for Alaska Airlines, you know, being able to recall furloughed employees with that anticipation of hopefully more summer travel. I know I'm looking forward to traveling again. We've also seen extraordinary growth in the biotech and biomedical device industry in the Bothell-Woodinville corridor, and the emerging importance of the intersection of STEM and public health coming out of the pandemic. So this morning, we have the opportunity to hear from a panel of leaders in public health, biotech, and data visualization. We have with us today Darren Reddick, who is the Executive Director for Operations and Interim CEO at Providence Northwest. We have Sue Kramer, Instructional Designer for Tableau, Mike Barlow, VP of Manufacturing for AGC Biologics, and Nicole Thompson, health policy analyst for the Snohomish Health District. So to get started, I'd like to briefly have you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what your organization sees as a need in terms of skill and talent for your future workforce. So Darren, let's start with you.
Well, good morning, and thanks for inviting me here. Again, my name's Darren Reddick, and I work at Providence in Everett. And of course, Providence is a very large medical center and healthcare system in the Snohomish County area. We're soon to be about 591 licensed beds with a level 2 trauma center. And we, operate just shy of probably $900,000 of net revenue in a year. So we're a fairly large organization with about 3,500 employees in the county. And as we see ourselves kind of moving forward, it seems that we've been in this mode of continuing hiring. We seem to be struggling, I would say, to continue to kind of fill all our positions in the medical center, and it's become a little bit more difficult as the pandemic has hit as well. As we see kind of our workforce needs, it's still very focused in nursing is a very focused area where we're always looking to fill roles, and especially as we look at some of the specialty areas like an ICU and surgery, even an L&D, those specialty areas of nursing are even more difficult to hire. So we're always looking for skilled, talented individuals that can fill those roles. We also are always hiring in a few other areas. It seems to be difficult to get talent in. I would say our diagnostic imaging services tend to continue to always have open positions, especially as we get into the more advanced imaging modes like CT and MRI. And so there's always openings there in terms of growth as well. And then as we kind of think through some of the other areas in biomedical equipment and engineering and data analysts, I mean, we're continuing to fill roles in that group as well. And so, in the workforce here is what we see kind of moving forward. We see that as being continuing to be a challenge for us, that we'll be searching for a talent for it. We also will be looking for individuals who not only have that talent, but are, I would say, succinct in communication and very collaborative in their workforce. As you can imagine, a lot of this work is pretty complicated in an organization that requires a lot of different teams working together and individuals with different talents and skills working together to solve problems in real time. And so the ability to have that knowledge, but also the ability to be very collaborative and working effectively as a team in real time is also a behavior and skill that is highly needed in our medical center.
Great. Thank you so much, Darren. Mike, you're up.
Sorry about that, messing around with the mute button over here. So yeah, my name is Mike Barlow. I'm the Vice President of Manufacturing at AGC Biologics. Over the next year, we have quite a aggressive growth plan. So we'll be expanding in our biologics and cell therapy operations here. And really, we're looking for people to join us that have kind of an aptitude or a curiosity around science, technology, and engineering, specifically the life sciences. A keen eye for quality and appreciation for right the first time, and can basically follow a complex set of instructions. And so we typically will recruit, first year, our entry level people are coming directly out of college, usually a science or engineering program. But through this STEM program and other initiatives we have quite a good train in place program that we've built and improved over time. So we're currently hiring in manufacturing, quality assurance, process development. Pretty much every aspect of our business is growing right now. So that's a quick overview and kind of a view of our needs.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. Mm-hmm. Nicole?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nicole Thompson, the Health Policy Analyst with the Snohomish Health District. I have been in realm of public health for over 20 years, and I am what I call a child of environmental public health. And what is, I usually start a conversation with folks with what is public health. And I know that sounds like kind of a silly conversation right now, given the fact that we're in a pandemic, and I feel like people know what public health is. That being said, most people still don't know what public health is. And so just a high overview about what it is we do. Generally across the state, there are 3 or 4 different tiers or silos, if you will, of public health. If the public health system is working correctly, we are invisible to everyone, which also creates its own challenges, including workforce development. Because, you know, people don't really know what we are and do. And so college graduates in our field become a little bit harder to grasp. And so we encase really about 4 different areas. Like I said, one is environmental public health, one is prevention services. And then depending on sort of where else you are across the state and other local health jurisdictions across the nation, you get into subspecialties like communicable disease prevention, policy. There's just an untold number of things. And so what we look for are folks who are doing anything from biology, nursing, epidemiologists, toxicologists, plumbers even, depending on the jurisdiction you're in. A lot of drafting skills, plan reviews, technical and analytical skills, and communications. One of the biggest challenges we have is communicating all this technical stuff. I mean, just look at the pandemic, to people who don't have a technical background. And so having those translations or the ability to shift and frame and share information that can be highly technical and in an accessible way to a variety of audiences is key. I will also just pair up a little bit on what Darren was saying around nurses. From the lens of a strict pandemic view right now, we need nurses, lots and lots of nurses to get those vaccines out. And so that is where I will stop with that. But I highly recommend public health. It's quite a unique field. You can be a generalist or a specialist. And all things technology and science coming together into you just never know what your hat's going to bring that day. So
thanks, Nicole. And Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Kramer, and I work at Tableau Software, which is now part of Salesforce. We're acquired about a year ago, and I've been there about a year and a half now. And my role is on the academic team, where I am designing curricula to help colleges all over the world teach data literacy and data analytics. And our company is an analytics platform. So our mission is to help people see and understand their data. And to answer the question of the skills that we see a need, I would sum it up as 3 or 4. And that would be data skills and computational skills and computational thinking. In a way, our disciplines are merging. And I think a common theme would be computational thinking and data literacy would be a base that I think almost every field needs these days. And when we bring in new people, I see the ability to adapt, learn quickly, and not be afraid of learning new things. And I also, before joining Tableau, I taught at UW-Bothell. So I was teaching statistics and a variety of other STEM courses. And that is something I see as crucial for the future of the workforce, is to get students to be unafraid to take on new things and be able to learn quickly and adapt. And thanks again for including me on this panel.
Oh, thank you, Sue. Okay, so we have questions for each of our panelists this morning. So I'm going to circle back to you, Darren. You know, the pandemic has highlighted the critical need for healthcare professionals, as you and Nicole have both pointed out. Could you speak a little bit more to Providence's system locally and talk a little bit more about the STEM talent that's needed in the public health sector? And I'm curious in particular about how we think about bringing in those talented, young workers to help us provide equitable access to healthcare for the communities coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great question. As we think back, I mean, I often think back to when this started for us at Providence, which was in January, was quite a bit before, well, for us at Providence and for Snohomish County Public Health as well, back in early, mid-January when we had our first patient. And we felt good about being able to take this patient in and treat the patient successfully and frankly safely for our caregivers and everybody around them. And that was because of in essence, training and drilling around this situation with possible different infectious disease situations. And we had a drill with other partners around how we would manage the patients, and we tested that drill. And in doing so, it meant that we were working very closely with different infectious disease experts, infectious control. We were working with different talented organizations in the state and the county as we worked through our plan, and we're able to actually successfully care for this patient. And then as it grew, it really pointed to the need of other skills and other groups within the organization. And if you think through this, as we looked at the pandemic growing and using data analytics to help us understand what the projections were for potential cases and how many would be hospitalized, and planning for that, and to plan for that, we needed talent that would help us do analytics around what we would expect for PPE use, right, for different volumes and different types of patients. And so that looped into our supply chain team, and having talent on our campuses that can help manage the projections around different supplies needed for the different types of cases and getting them filled and resourced throughout. It also pointed to the need of actually working well with our facility team. So we need talented facility engineers and caregivers in our facility to help us make changes to the physical environment to make it safe for the patients. And so as we were going through the pandemic, it really pointed to other caregivers that are important in our workforce. So the engineering teams on the facilities, the supply chain teams, turning rooms negative, managing the physical environment to make it safe, getting supplies in place. And you can just go on and on and on around the need of different caregivers. And so as we kind of look forward in the future and kind of recover from the pandemic, we've learned that we will have a more critical need for really talented and really, I would say, kind of more with a system thinking background for all of our different caregivers who can help us kind of piece together kind of the need in real time. And so it really pointed to a number of other positions in our system that we need. I will say, during the pandemic, we've had a more difficult time filling some of the entry-level skilled positions in the medical center, partly because just trying to find that talent. And we've had a number of open positions in these positions as well. So I think being able to bring in young skilled workers, even at some entry level that we can develop, is also going to be a critical importance for us moving forward.
That is a perfect segue, Darren, to my question for you, Mike. As we're talking about STEM education, and for me, I'm really interested in the integration of STEM and public health, especially coming off of the pandemic. Could you tell us a little bit about the AGC Biologics BioPath internship program? And if you could share maybe some of the impacts that this investment has made on your ability to acquire talent and how you might expand that program. And of course, selfishly, I'm thinking about college students. But what advice might you give to other companies who are interested in developing these kinds of programs?
Yeah, so first, this has been a great partnership for AGC. We've been able to bring in a number of students, STEM students, and show them the basics of biotechnology to begin building a base of experience before they move on to their next academic step. And that has worked out really well. Recently, so this is our second or third year iteratively through this process. We've learned there's a subset of students who have come here, and this has happened twice now, where they've participated, they've gotten the training, they've built a baseline of experience, and they've made the decision to actually stay with us and work while they're going to school. So this is a great job for a student that is looking to, work school at the same time. So, again, we're still learning about this and trying to understand a little bit more about, how to repeat this process. But this is a thread that we're pulling because it's a win-win for everybody. It helps fill our workforce with skilled talent, and it's great for them. They can continue to grow and complete their degree.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mike. So Nicole, let's pivot back a little bit to public health here again and thinking about, sort of where we are now, some of the recent mandates that have been coming out of the federal government about, increasing access to vaccines. What's your assessment of where Snohomish County will be with respect to the pandemic over the coming summer and fall months? And are you hearing any information about any changes to phases as more vaccines come online?
That's a very easy question, Leslie. That's a nice softball, right? Yes, so all things vaccine. So let me back up. So the vaccine, how public health works in the pandemic scenario, as you've all been seeing, is it's a collaborative and partnership approach. A multidisciplinary partnership between the biologics community, the pharmaceutical community, the healthcare community, and the public health industry, as well as a incredible dearth of volunteers at this point to create what we're seeing now in terms of getting vaccines out to you. And there's many other industries in there that I have not even yet touched on: manufacturing, distribution, and this is a global. It's global in how we're choosing to respond to this. And in Snohomish County, we are just one of many in the state. And these challenges are exactly coming to head with us. It's, as you know, it's impacting our economic viability and how public health works in nexuses with our business community, because a healthy economy is based on having healthy workers. And so if we can't create both of those in a symbiosis and working towards that, we are unable to achieve all the goals in creating a vibrant community for us as economically, as well as allowing each individual in our community to reach their fullest potential, to achieve all of their hopes, goals, and dreams in context with having their choices available to them. And so that has been, I think, what has played out amongst, at every level. You could see that the tension between that economy, mental health, public health constraints, along with economic development, and also then the systems approach to addressing public health. And so you have seen this sort of what people have reflected to me as one being an inconsistent messaging, constantly changing. Why can't we just pick something and stick with it? And in the spirit of change and changing and growing, I will do two things. One is just to acknowledge that when the science community said that this was a new virus, that was no joke. We've seen things that look like this, and so there are some similarities with that, but this was a whole new ball of wax. And so all of our science fields and all the professionals in both public health and healthcare and other research industries, we are all learning as we go. And that is also why you're seeing all the frequent increases and changes as we learn more, you're seeing our industries react and be responsive to those changes in that learning and that growing. It's also a scaling of like, oh no, we need testing. Oh no, now we need vaccines. How do we shift and change the allocation and the proportion of testing that's happening in relationship to vaccinations? And what does that look like in our community? And so some of the newest changes I'm sure everyone has been aware of is that the governor has it started with the federal government and President Biden giving a lot of health and human services directives out to us nationwide about who's up next. And it started with a conversation with our educators and our child care providers. And then that started additional conversations with our veterans and other persons that are high risk and yet also tied to economic recovery and getting those changes up and going. And so March 22nd, coming up next week, is a big benchmark for us, and that will be opening up statewide. Those are critical workers in some congregate settings. Our agricultural community, food processing, grocery stores, corrections, all those folks living in congregate settings, and persons who are ages 16 and over who are pregnant or have a disability that puts them at high risk are becoming eligible. April 12th is the following benchmark. So it's all the previous folks that we've already mentioned, plus people aged 50 and over with 2 or more comorbidities. And comorbidities are 2 risk factors, right? So if you have diabetes and hypertension or things like that. So you have to have 2 comorbidities along with the age. And then April 26th is, again, all the previous phased persons plus people aged 16 with 2 or more comorbidities, and people living in congregate settings, people who are experiencing homelessness in or access services in those congregate settings. Then we had, so that's just the latest group of changes. And then earlier this week, we had yet another HHS directive from the president around making sure everyone is eligible beginning in May. So you see we have this increasing ramp up. My expectations with this is, one, just setting everyone's expectations here on this call and people whom we interact with, that being eligible to put your name on the list does not mean we suddenly have exponentially more vaccine available. We are still at a place where we have, let me just pull up some stats here. We still have a considerable amount of vaccine to get everybody. We are getting about 20 to 30,000 vaccines each week to Snohomish County, but only 10 to 30% of those have been for first dose allocations. And 2 to 10,000 available doses for your second doses. Yeah, so we have a mismatch in scalability. We have considerably more people. We're over 820,000 members strong in Snohomish County, and clearly at 20 to 30,000 vaccines each week, it is going to take us many, many months to get where we need to go. And so even when the doors are thrown wide open in May, we need to be patient with the vaccine allocations and the supply chain management issues and the production issues that the industries themselves are having challenges. And that's just not production of the vaccine itself. That's also, if you think about all the vials, the caps, the lid, the transportation mechanisms, like all the syringes, like all down the supply chain are having ripple impact for us to be able to get you all vaccinated and back to doing what we know we want to do with economics. I will also just couch a couple other things that we have there. Is that, yes, Johnson & Johnson is a one-shot deal, but with all these vaccinations, and people are so excited about just having one shot instead of 2, yes, all those things considered, we still don't know. There's a lot of variants that are popping up, and although they seem pretty strong, we don't know for sure. Enter science. more research is needed there to see effectiveness. We also are still unsure about the length of time that immunity is conferred for with these various vaccines. Insert science, lots of research needed there, and continuing to share that. And what we know is that we need to continue to have social distancing and masking, even though you're feeling very bolstered. None of these vaccines are 100%, much like condom use in pregnancy is not 100% usage. Effectiveness, vaccines are in that same category. And so we need to continue to be diligent in utilizing all the protective measures that we have available to us. So that's kind of on that. So where we're going to be by the summer is hopefully we can continue just to see ramp up and get all of our most vulnerable communities tested and vaccinated up. That would be my goal. I do think there's been a talk, and what you hinted at, Leslie, was the seasonality of what is coming up and what's happening. We did see historically a substantial case increase in the summer. More people are having backyard barbecues, large group parties, graduations, and whatnot. And so, although more people are outdoors, somehow that also seems to confer that we can congregate in bigger groups with bigger parties. So we don't want that to happen again this summer. And we're also suspecting, crystal ballish, looking out towards the fall, that this is going to be something similar as you will with like the seasonal flu. And so we are going to need to continue to be vigilant. We have our seasonal flu shots, all those. And so just continuing those conversations. And then lastly, there was a conversation about workforce and what we need to make this all happen. I will continue to stress nurses. And then we also have a couple opportunities for those individuals who just want to participate in the process, regardless of your knowledge and your basis in science, technology, engineering, and whatnot. Is we have a medical reserve corps. It's a volunteer organization that helps staff all of our vaccine and testing events, mass vaccination, as well as some pop-ups events around the county. And we need all kinds of volunteers to help make that possible. That includes everything from helping folks register for vaccinations. We have a call center. We have greeters. We have traffic controllers. We have all sorts of opportunities there. And it's our Medical Reserve Corps. And you can just type in Snohomish County Medical Reserve Corps. And when I'm done talking, I will put that link in the chat box for you all. And it is open for, I know it's called Medical Reserve Corps, but really anybody. We accept nurses, doctors, anybody in the medical profession who can also give vaccines, but also just down to, wanting to be a kind face when concerned residents roll through our facilities.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That's really helpful information. Really appreciate that. Sue, I'm gonna take kind of a hard pivot here and add a letter to our acronym. We hear a lot about STEAM these days. And one of the things I always think about in that intersection between art and STEM is thinking about how we use and contextualize data. And Tableau is renowned for this work, and as well as developing these great dashboards and visualization tools to inform our understanding and our decision-making around data. So could you maybe share an example of how Tableau and what you do with data visualization intersects with STEM, and how you are helping STEM organizations, public health organizations, to kind of get a handle on all of these huge amounts of data that we're generating these days?
Thank you, Leslie. I have two examples that come to mind. And the first one is before the pandemic, we partnered with PATH. So we have a foundation, Tableau Foundation, and we work with PATH. And if many of you may know PATH, but Program for Appropriate Technology and Health here in Seattle. And they had a project on monitoring malaria in in Africa. And we worked with PATH to develop visualizations that help them get vital medicine and monitor infectious disease situation. And they had a dashboard that helped them move very efficiently. And it is really about visualizing and being able to quickly, appropriately, efficiently communicate the data you have at hand. And when I used to teach that, you would come into somewhere and they're looking at dozens and dozens of Excel spreadsheets, and you can't make sense of that. And our tool does make it very, very easy to do that. And we also have a community, Tableau Public, where we aim to bring people together to share their data and help each other work with the tool, help each other learn skills. And the second example I want to bring up is the COVID tracking hub. And this might lead into one of your some other questions around the need for our workforce to be adaptable and respond quickly. So when that pandemic happened, which I can't believe it's a year ago, we were sent home, and members of our team partnered with, I believe it was King County Public Health and a number of other organizations, and created the COVID tracking hub, which is on our website. And I can share that link in a minute when I'm done here, where you can monitor the pandemic. So early on, we were one of the first to have this dashboard up that many organizations used to track what was going on with COVID. And we partnered with many organizations to make that happen. So those would be the two examples. And again, I want to reiterate just how important data skills are for, I'd say, every discipline. Right now, public health and the pandemic is front and center, but we have climate change, many other problems to solve, where data and being able to communicate with that data, ask the right questions with that data, are going to be crucial.
Thank you so much, Sue. We have a little bit more time for a few follow-up questions. So Sue, I'm actually going to stick with you for the next question, and follow up more on ideas about internships, apprenticeships. How do we create these pipelines of talent all the way, through from K through 12 through, college and higher education pathways into the STEM disciplines. And so, how is Tableau thinking about internships and mentoring and those kinds of programs?
We are thinking a lot about that question. And I know we had a conversation a while back just about that. So we have an internship program. So every summer we get, I think, a few hundred interns. And my team has been lucky enough. We get one or two interns every year. And they're fantastic. And oftentimes they end up staying on working full time when they graduate at our company. But also my team, because I'm on the academic team, we're working on right now developing mentorship programs that would involve our customers. We have customers in many, many disciplines that are using our platform to analyze data. Can we bring an analyst from a local company to help students at the local university? And that's a type of work that I'd like to see happen, as well as underserved minorities and in communities, to give more doors open for them to have opportunities and exposure to companies and opportunities that maybe have been not there before. And I know it can impact students, and I would like to see more of that happening. And I know my team is working on creating that. So if there are any panelists with wonderful ideas or happen to be one of our customers, I would love to meet with you and learn about that.
Thanks, Sue. Nicole, how about you? You talked about the volunteer dashboard, specifically for the medical corps volunteers. Do you have other avenues in the health district for for internships and mentoring kinds of programs for students?
Yeah. So yes, yes, and yes. So public health as an industry, we are an aging industry. I'm actually on the young side of the public health spectrum. And so we have a lot of need to increase new ideas, new voices, and just new talent into the industry across the nation, quite honestly. And so there has been a lot of talk across the public health sector in general about how to increase capacity and learning. We do lose a lot of folks. Again, public health is just hidden, right? And so when people think about doing science, they have a tendency to go more splashy, and public health is not splashy. We're quiet, we're behind the scenes, but we're working hard and we're multidisciplinary. And so what the health district itself, we have a few options that are available. One, we do summer internships. The last couple of years have been a bit wonky with COVID, so there hasn't been a lot of internships formally happening, just because literally all hands are on deck with COVID response. But generally speaking, we do have internship programs. I have hosted interns doing some policy work. I'm tying that actually with a medical student who was interested in finding out what public health was like within their scope of practice. As well as we have a Public Health Advisory Council. Our Public Health Advisory Council is a volunteer organization representing over 26 sectors of what we're public health. So we want to put public in public health, not just our board of health members providing feedback and information. And so we have this advisory council, and one of lots of different ideas on there and open sectors. But one I would just like to highlight today is we have a youth sector. And traditionally that is for members who are in high school, late middle school, high school-ish. And we would like to open up that and have a conversation with, create a pipeline for members who can sit on that. It's a 1-year appointment. And that is coupled with and tied with, shadowing. If the member would like to go out with various members on our team, whether that's doing tuberculosis response, some clinical care. We also have our environmental health specialists. So going into a restaurant and doing a restaurant inspection, going out to a piece of property to do septic tank inspections and design builds and engineering plan review for septic tanks, although not very sexy, is very needed and has a lot of science and technology and engineering and math that underpin that work. And so those opportunities are available for our youth as well. And other than that, I would just say always please reach out to us. We do try to help and grow our public health industry, and to really sort of daylight a little bit about what is public health and how we nexus with all the different disciplines.
Great, thanks, Nicole. I want to just acknowledge this comment in the chat, which is really great, from Doug at Harmson. STEM also includes engineers, geologists, surveyors, etc., not just medical fields, IT. We already have terrible shortages in these fields as well. And we do have, hopefully, some infrastructure coming from the federal government over the next several months. And we do have some pretty important labor shortages in these other sectors of STEM that are important. So I appreciate you reminding us of that. And especially as we think about, coming out of this pandemic and all of the various ways that we want to be thinking about bringing the economy back. I want to throw this one to Mike and then to Darren. What do you see, in your organizations that you had to pivot to and do differently during the pandemic that you either want to hold on to that you maybe wouldn't have thought of before this sort of experience? And what sort of things have you had to stop during the pandemic that you want to leave behind? We all think about, how is work going to change? And I'm curious about how work in your organizations is changing and how you think that's going to play out after the pandemic. And we only have about 10 minutes left, I think. So rapid fire.
Yeah, so for us at AGC, we're actually actively making a vaccine that's in clinical trial. And we have produced clinical material for a therapy that is a candidate now for emergency use approval. So COVID has actually made us very busy, and it's forced us to look at how we train and onboard, and that whole process from sourcing candidates to training them to getting them effective in role. So, you know, that's probably the biggest thing in terms of what we wouldn't change is that, like looking at that detail and how you bring people in and make them effective quickly.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. I think one of the obvious changes for us has early on was the increased use of telemedicine. And, you know, when we first had a number of patients that were testing COVID positive in the emergency department that frankly weren't sick enough for hospitalization, we would send them home, but we really needed to be able to monitor their oxygen saturation levels, et cetera. So we were able to send patients home with you know, basically different types of medical equipment that we can monitor them and keep them at home. And I think that is one thing that will stay. And in fact, as a system, we're looking at how do we move more towards more care at home. We're calling a program Hospital at Home, but kind of using telemedicine to maybe keep the care at home more than in the hospital where possible, and use technology to make it safe or help make it safe. I think that's one. I think the other piece for us is, you know, I think this is for everybody. We've all learned how to be better at communicating through technology and virtual meetings, and realizing, you know, it's important to have face-to-face conversations and in meetings, but not all of our meetings need to be in person. And I think it really opened up our eyes about how much of our workforce that could work from home once in a while and really and be effective with that. And so I think as we move forward, we'll try to leverage that as well. And of course, from a sustainability standpoint and from a carbon footprint standpoint, if we don't have that many additional cars on the road, that's going to be a win for all of us. And I would say probably finally, one thing, unfortunately, that has been learned from the pandemic is the need for behavioral health services. And that need has grown, and we're seeing a real demand for that even in our hospitals today, much higher than what it was a year ago. And we are pivoting to opening a new mental health unit for additional mental health beds in the hospital. And I think, you know, I think there will be a growth and need in our community for mental health services, and it's one that we will be probably expanding and needing people for as well in the future.
That's really informative. Thank you both so much. I want to touch on Gary's question that he put in the chat and really just open this up to any of the panelists. Considering the health, STEM, and medical industry clusters, what part can existing industries in Snohomish County play in the medical innovations effort post-COVID? So how do we bring in the other sectors of our economy in the region to amplify this work as we are coming out of this pandemic? Nicole, is that something you want to maybe touch on?
Ooh, sure.
I keep putting you on the spot, don't I?
It's all right. That morning coffee is kicking in. You know, it's a great question, and I actually don't know the answer to this question. My gut is telling me, which is partnerships and partnerships and partnerships. You know, I think one of the things that we have been exceedingly well at doing historically is siloing our work. And that's not just in the public health field, but that is our individual fiefdoms that we have created in all of our sectors and all of our industries. And what the pandemic, I really think, has shown us is that we are not all that separated from each other. There is a lot of interconnectedness. We are all one, and we all rely on each other in a way that may not have been immediately apparent to us. And so, you know, how do we create an ongoing commitment to multi-industry, multi-generational, I don't know what that word is, scoping partnerships. And I will actually give a shout out to the Economic Alliance in this work. You know, public health is a fairly new member to the EASC's advocacy board in the last 3 years. And so I just want to, that is one example of how we can lead and create those multidisciplinary partnerships. And so keep it going. You know, when we have our medical, you know, medical dental buildings, for example, put an engineer next door or whatnot. So that's my popcorn answer. And then I also just want to go back to Doug's statement about the variety of other things in the STEM bandwidth, and yes, yes, and yes. And although I didn't talk about it a lot, our public health field, I could do a whole other talk on that in the nexus with geologists, soils design, soil engineering, with our drinking water programs, our on-site sewage programs, as well as food science. And so there are just a lot of different things that environmental public health in particular does and is also in great need of as well. So thank you, Doug, for bringing that forward.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's, you know, there are so many integrations between all of the STEM disciplines and public health, community engagement, and just how we interact with each other in the community and support each other in our communities that, you know, as Marcia pointed out, some of these things are hidden. In the same way that you mentioned, Nicole, as, you know, public health, if it's doing its job, nobody thinks about it. And so, you know, I'm always really interested in conversations about how we continue to develop these unique partnerships and opportunities to engage with each other in ways that we might not have thought about before the pandemic, because we do have other big problems to solve that all feed into each other. You know, we think about air quality with respect to airborne diseases, and, you know, we have fire season coming up in addition to all these other things, right? And the impacts of climate change on how the fire system has changed over time. And so I'm just really excited about all of the opportunities that there are for, you know, UW-Bothell, you know, our neighbors, Cascadia College. You know, Marcia, you made another great point about, you know, even though I'm at a 4-year institution, and of course I encourage, you know, 4-year college degrees, but there are many, many other sectors of the economy that are as important, that are, you know, trade jobs that require only a 2-year degree, that are really critical to our economy and to our communities. And so I really appreciate that. We're going to end on this sort of a thinking on your feet moment here. If you had to describe the post-pandemic STEM workforce in one word, what would that be? Darren, you want to start?
Yeah, I will go back to collaborative, and because of how important it is for our workforce in our more complicated world to be successful and required that we all work together really well. So if a workforce being collaborative is really important.
Great. Mike, how about you? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm so sorry. I thought I did that.
Hey, it only happened once in our whole hour and a half. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I would say determined. So I talked about the two interns earlier. One of them is actually full-time working on one of the vaccines right now. And so this pandemic has been so impactful and destructive. It feels good to be a part of some of the solutions.
Sue?
I would say interdisciplinary. And I want to add to the last comment of how important that is, and pushback maybe on our university system. And how do we make training that is truly interdisciplinary going forward to really address the needs of our community and workforce.
And Nicole, you get the last one word.
Exhausted with we have been going for just gangbusters hard at this for over a year now in Snohomish County. And I will tell you, the public health field is tired. We are exhausted. But I would also say daylighted. You know, so that would be my final word is daylighted.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you all so much for joining the panel this morning. I've learned a lot. Hopefully our audience members have learned a lot as well. And it's just really great, especially for me being relatively new to the community, to have these opportunities to meet such amazing people. We have a great community here in Snohomish County. I want to thank Gary and Angie and Katie for inviting me to moderate this panel today. It's just been really a great hour. And I want to turn it over to Gary for final thoughts and closing remarks.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. That was awesome. Panelists, we really appreciate you all for just joining us and doing the coffee salute with me as well. This is valuable information. It is recorded. So if you want that information, you want to check back on some of the interesting things that were said by our panelists, you can do so. And guess what? Next week, we actually have another coffee chat. And next week, we have the opportunity to listen to American travel writer, author, activist, television personality, Rick Steves. March 23rd, 8:30 a.m. Be there or be square. Again, thank you all for joining us for another Economic Alliance Snohomish County Coffee Chat. Take care, folks.
Thanks.